Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 4th of March of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine. Important, US suspends all military aid to Ukraine until Kiev demonstrates commitment to peace talks. Fox News confirmed media reports citing the White House. Another important, only Trump can decide whether to resume military aid to Ukraine, but Zelensky does not want to negotiate peace. That was stated by the White House. Furthermore, when talking about Zelensky himself, there was a very interesting article published about him that he doesn't want to have any meeting. Zelensky doesn't want to talk to Trump in public anymore. Now, you know that the Americans demanded Zelensky to apologize for everything he did, but we see that he doesn't want to do this in public, which obviously means that Zelensky is not going to ask for help from the United States of America. US military aid supplies to Kiev stopped at 4:30 of Moscow time. The suspension of military aid concerns all weapons outside of Ukraine, Bloomberg writes. Ukraine will only be able to fight at its current pace until the summer without US military aid, a European official told CNN. Once supplies start to run low, the consequences for Ukraine will be serious, even if other countries try to fill the gap. Due to the suspension of US aid, the Ukraine armed forces will primarily feel a shortage of air defense missiles and HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems, says Verkhovna Rada Deputy Goncharenko. So as we can see, the situation for Ukraine is very difficult, and nobody can tell for sure what exactly is going to be next. But obviously the Western countries, Donald Trump himself, want either Zelensky to sign anything and everything the United States of America wants, or to resign and someone else will do a job for him. But today we got another very important article, another very important piece of news. So from Moscow, let's discuss this in detail. According to information we received from pro-Western resources, Trump asked Putin to mediate its nuclear talks with Iran. That was stated by Bloomberg. The Russian president agreed, the agency writes. It is noted that Trump voiced this request to Putin during their telephone conversation, after which the discussion was continued by the US and Russian delegation at a meeting at Riyadh. So this is a very important piece of news, because now we see that most likely the question of Israel and the question of the Middle East is much more important for the United States of America than Ukraine. But the question is why the Trump decided to ask for help, to ask Putin for help. And I'll remind you that in January, more precisely on the 17th of January of 2025, we got a lot of very important updates and articles about the situation. The Iranian president arrived in Moscow on an official visit. The Kremlin will host talks between Vladimir Putin and Masoud Pezeshkian, following which the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement will be signed. In addition, the heads of two states will discuss important issues of mutual interest related to the global and regional agenda. So according to information we have, right before the Trump's inauguration, the comprehensive agreement of strategical partnership between Russian Federation and Iran was signed in Moscow, which means that Iran is currently located inside of some Russian defense shield or something like this, which means that the United States of America can't act aggressively against the state until they receive some promises or maybe some obligations from the Russian side. And Trump understands that if he wants to receive the nuclear deal with Iran, first of all, he needs to be 100% sure that he has a very strong cards. But he can't have very strong cards because Iran and Russia has agreement. So that's why I believe that Trump decided to give the Russians the Ukraine in exchange for Iran. Obviously, we're not saying that the United States of America are going to begin war, but obviously, without protection of Russian Federation, Trump has more chances to get this deal between USA and Iran and to keep Israel in safe. White House preparing plans for possible lifting of sanctions against Russia. This is another strong card that Trump has in this negotiation process. So, of course, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, the situation develops not in Ukrainian favor. But the problem is that even if Russia and the United States of America find a solution how to resolve issues between them regarding Ukraine, regarding Iran, regarding Syria, there is Europe that will not accept anything signed and agreed between these two countries. For example, today, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced this morning a 800 billion euro plan to rearm Europe with an additional 150 billion in loans for European defense investments, stating we are in the area of rearmament. Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. This is a moment for Europe and we are ready to step up. So obviously this is something dangerous, at least for Russian Federation, and obviously the Russians need to find a solution how to fight this issue as well. Anyway, the situation is very difficult and we see that Zelensky has less and less chances and, let's say, corridors for maneuvering. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Suji area because we got lots of very important updates from this area. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians, more precisely the units of the 83rd Brigade, managed to establish complete control over 50 or even more percent of the settlement of Zhuravka. According to them, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the central part. The Ukrainians controls just the southern part, but obviously if the Russians continue the same way, the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back further in the southern direction. They will be forced to retreat toward the settlement of Belovody. Another important details are coming from the settlement of Lebedivka. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Russians indeed, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over more than 60 or 70% of the settlement of Lebedivka. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, they controlled just the eastern part of this small village. By the way, I'll remind you that several days ago, several pro-Russian, very reliable sources reported that the village of Lebedivka was captured and secured by the Russians completely. Anyway, we are keeping this area as a contested area until we get additional clarifications or geolocations that can confirm this. The main clashes currently are taking place in the northern part in the area of Malaya Loknya. We got lots of very interesting updates from this territory. While the first group of Russian forces are bombing and attacking the settlement with tossful and thrower systems with FABs, trying to reduce everything on their way till ruins with the purpose to reduce any resistance from the Ukrainian side. Another group of Russian forces managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt. We are talking about sabotage and reconnaissance group, and the Russian sources reported, more precisely the official Telegram channel of the group of forces North stated that as a result of this operation, as a result of sabotage operation, the Russians managed to destroy bridges between the settlements of Kazachia Loknya and the settlement of Suja. Through the river of Loknya. So this is the river, and the Russians are saying that they managed to destroy either this bridge or this bridge. Anyway, the Russians reported that logistic of the armored forces of Ukraine in this part of Suji direction was completely destroyed. We are not saying that it's completely destroyed without any possibilities to restore it, but obviously the Ukrainians will be able to restore this logistic in the very near future. Probably 2-3 days are required to do this. But these 3 days can be enough for the armored forces of Russian Federation to break the Ukrainians' resistance in the area of Malaya Loknya and to capture the settlement completely. So most likely this is exactly the plan of the armored forces of Russian Federation. First to destroy the Ukrainian logistic to the northern part, and then as a result of decisive offensive operation to establish complete control over this settlement. So most likely before the beginning of the European summit that is going to take place on the 6th of March, the Russians most likely will be able to establish complete control over this pocket. And once again, if the Russians are able to do this, then most likely the battle for the settlement of Kazachia Loknya is going to start. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupyansk direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the village of Zagryzovo. Today this information was confirmed by neutral mappers. Yesterday the same information information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian sources, which means that the Russians continue their offensive operation, and maybe during the next several days we're going to receive additional updates that will give us information that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take the village of Zagryzovo under complete control. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Chasiv Yar and in the vicinity of the city of Toretsk. The Russians during the previous 24 hours were hunting, attacking and bombing the Ukrainian positions in this area. Currently, the situation is very interesting. You know that the Russians as well as the Ukrainians are changing their doctrine regarding the priorities, and now we can see that's one of the main priorities of both the Russians and the Ukrainians is to find out and to destroy the temporary deployment points of FPV drones. The Russians are very good at this. They have a very good skills with this. For example, in this video we can see how the Russians managed first to discover the movements of Ukrainian drone of Baba Yaga type that was flying probably to the base. The Russians decided not to destroy the drone but to follow the drone until the let's say destination point, where they managed to discover the temporary deployment point of Ukrainian FPV drone operators, and then the Russians began bombing and attacking in this area with artillery. And things like this happens everywhere along the line of combat contact. Currently, if you win not the sky, if you win not the artillery duels, winning of these battles means nothing. Means a lot, but obviously the main target is to win FPV drone duels. If you win this type of duels, then most likely you will be able to win even more. As for the Pokrovsk direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainian sources published the video from the northern part of Pyshane. In this video, we could see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this part, which means that the Russians, as a result of counter-offensive operation, managed to restore control completely over this settlement. Furthermore, we got several more videos of how the Russians were capturing the Ukrainians in the settlement of Udachne. The situation here is very difficult. The Ukrainians counter-attack every single day, with the purpose to restore control over this pocket. The Russians, as we can see, time is playing in Russian favor when talking about defense. The Russians are not attacking, they are trying to dig in deeper to prepare foothold and just repelling another Ukrainian attack. And as we can see, as for now, the Russians are very successful with this. Now let's discuss the situation in the Bogatyr direction. According to information we have, just today the units of the 114th Motor Rifle, Separate Motor Rifle Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Andriivka. This territory, as you can see, and according to most of the mappers, was colored in Russian favor a long time ago, but just now, just today, the Russian sources published the video, a very long video of how this process of taking the settlement under control took place. The Russians started offensive operation in Andriivka several months ago, and most likely just today, on the 4th of March, they managed to finish this battle. Most likely tomorrow, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this information, and if this is true, if this information is correct, then most likely, without protection from the north, the Ukrainians from Constantinople would be forced to fall back in the very near future. We expect that after the fall of Andriivka, this flower is also going to bloom, and the Ukrainians will begin another retreat process towards more reliable positions, which means that the Russians will continue offensive. Another important thing is that during the next several weeks we are going to see very hot anomalous weather for this part of the world, which means that the surface will become good in the very near future, which means that the Russians will have another window of opportunities for offensive operations using the broad frontline attacks and significant number of armored vehicles and tanks. And as we discussed, due to these, let's say, suspicions of supplying Ukraine with weapons, we understand that the Russians have a small gap, small window of opportunities during the next 2-3 months. And these next 2-3 months can be decisive for Ukraine, because if the Russians are able to defeat the Ukrainians, then most likely the Russians will be able to break through the Ukrainian positions and defense along the entire line of border, entire line of combat contact, starting from the Bryansk region and ending somewhere in the area of Zaporozhye, and nobody can tell for sure where exactly the Ukrainians would be able to stop or to slow down the Russians. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.